Okay, so I lied. I'm not in a different place. You don't have the benefit of looking at a different background. I don't know what's going on. This is lodging for me this year is a little up in the air and a little disconcerting. Things like that tend to stress me out a little bit and take my mind off of work, where at this time of year I especially don't need it. But I'm still here for now. I don't know what's going to happen next week. But I did want to say in last week's installment, I neglected to point out something that is, I think, very important about it. And that is why we are all so susceptible to it, is that once we get that adrenaline rush and things start to expand, for us things are slowing down, and so we the nature of it engenders within us a desire to just naturally speed up to compensate for what we see as a slowing down of the pace of the show. And actually what our minds are doing is something, as I went into last time, it's just the opposite. We actually speed up considerably. But that's why it's such an alluring trap, a very deceptive one for the performer, because once you feel that adrenaline, it makes us want to compensate for it. So there's that. As far as this week's installment, I am not only in between places, but I've been hit by a cold this week. I haven't been able to work for a few days, so that makes me a little more stressed out. And I asked Daniel Voss to send me some questions that I could address, and so I'm just going to confine this week's installment to a few of those. And the first of which I think was what advice would I give to someone who is going out for the first time, who's never done it before, what to kind of expect. And you're never going to be able to anticipate the immensity of going out and encountering people in an uncontrolled environment. There's no way to. It's like Clausewitz said: when you can train all your life to do battle on to do war on a battlefield, but that first impression of young recruits when they approach a battlefield and they hear the explosions all around them, cannonballs landing, there's nothing that can prepare a person for that. And so the only thing to do is to become battle hardened over time, and until then just put up a front like you know what you're doing. That's something that I will go into later, but for the time being, I would say take a table. Make yourself a table, the simplest, most sturdy, cheapest one. Stand is a tray jack stand from a restaurant. I went into a lot of this in my book, so obviously there are some of you that, many of you perhaps, that haven't read my book, so I might recommend that you seek that out, and so I don't have to say too much of this twice, but get a table, a board, have a board cut, or cut your own, 3/8" plywood, maybe 1/2 inch if you need it really big, but it's going to be heavy then, and cover it with a towel or some kind of cushion, and then some kind of surface on top. Velvet works real nice. I don't recommend leather, but a naga hide or something like that, where you can get traction doing card spreads, ribbon spreads on the table or whatever. But that gives you a surface, that gives you a focus, and that way you'll eventually maybe grow beyond a table. But for the time being, a table is a good way to start. As far as what to bring with you, Cellini said you need 3 tricks. Bring the best 3 tricks you have. That gives you a beginning, a middle, and end. As far as show structure is concerned, you want them to be different enough and visual enough to engage their interest. Something like, for years I used Cellini's version of the disappearing handkerchief with a color change at the end. I still occasionally use that, depending upon where I'm at, as an opener. And then after the opener, you introduce yourself and introduce the last trick. And then you do the second trick, and then in between the second trick and the last trick, you talk about the hat. And this greatly facilitates transitions. Transitions from one trick to another can be very tricky business. And lots of people issue applause because they don't want that signal as an ending in their show, because that gives people a thought, the room to think about leaving. So I'll go into this all in more depth later. But just to give you all some idea of, if you haven't gone out before, if you haven't performed outside in the street, ready yourself to not be particularly enthused with your take for the day or whatever, but understand it's going to be difficult. Apply yourself with a good sense of determination and gain the experience, because that's really what you need at this point. Everybody needs. I remember the first time out for me, where it was 1985. I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I went out in the afternoon when all the families were out there out in the hot sun with a table that I'd made, and did just basically close-up, because at that time that was what I excelled at. And stopping couples, stopping families, and just doing individual little shows. And over the day, I didn't know how to stop people. I didn't know. I was very unaccustomed to. Really, it was the first summer that I count as one of the beginnings, one of my first times out. And by the end of the day, I think I was out there for maybe 12, 13 hours before I finally left. I mean, a lot of that time was eating, or afterwards I went out and had a couple of beers with another performer there. But from the time that I got there in Boulder that day until the time I left, it was 13 hours, and I walked away with $39 in my pocket. I wasn't thrilled with the take by any means, but it was some of the sweetest money I've ever made in my life, because I was making it doing something that I loved doing, and that counted so much more than the dollars represented in my hat. And as far as why I started street performing myself, it was gradual. My initial motivation when I was 16, there was a couple of books that came out, 16 or 17. One was Passing the Hat by Patricia Campbell, and the other was Street Magic by Jeff Sheridan and Edward Claflin. And reading those 2 books, I realized that I would be able to travel. I would be able to travel the world using magic as a way to make my way. And that was incredibly attractive to me. So I wanted to learn magic as quickly as possible, and learn as much as I could, and start traveling the world. Well, it wasn't too long before I found out that the United States is not a haven for street performing. There are some areas, mainly on the coast. On the coasts of the east and west coast, that really were at that time, mid 70s, early 80s, as street performing meccas, but they were far from where I was in New Mexico and then Colorado and Texas. So I started taking inside gigs, and I learned over the next 4 or 5 years that inside gigs was a quick way to burn out on magic. I wasn't learning anything more. I wasn't progressing as a magician. And then finally I met Cellini when I had gone back out onto the street in Dallas in 1991. And I felt, when I was performing magic outside that summer, my love for magic was rekindled. I felt like this was it for me. And then I met Cellini, and that really determined the course of my life to this point. So the reason, I guess, being is the immediacy of street magic, the beauty, the simplicity of it is very beneficial to learning and seeing and meeting different people and cultures. And so here I am. And then as far as going out to a new pitch, if there's other performers, I personally don't seek out other performers when I'm on a pitch. I try and find some place where there's not a lot of guys. If I can work there, I continue. I just work away from them, maybe say hello to them at the end of the evening, and as I leave, always be polite and respectful of others. If there's no other place to work and you need to queue up with the other performers, introduce yourself, tell them what you do. They may give you an off time to where you can kind of audition to line up on the queue with them, or if it's in the busy part of the day, you may have to just go find someplace else. The queue may be closed until you provide for them some proof of your ability, because a lot of pitches, there may be only one big pitch in town, and that's the one where they all work and they've all proven themselves to be able to work there. A new guy in town may not, and you got to respect that. I'll always respect local performers, always, and always respect other performers, and try to treat them with the courtesy that you would like them to treat you. Don't hate on anybody, especially if you're new to a place. And understand, the first time you go out, as I said, can be overwhelming. I forgot who it was. I forgot who originally said it. I'll remember it later. Maybe put it in the footnotes or something to this episode. No plan survives contact with the enemy. A general commander said that. No matter how well your plan is put together, once you have that initial battle, you've got to refigure everything, because it changes everything every time you go out. So the one thing that I would stress more to beginners than anything else is don't worry about the magic so much. Understand you're doing the best stuff that you have. You're doing the stuff that you know in and out. These are the 3 tricks that are your pets that you can do under any conditions. Don't worry about that. Worry about your interaction with people, because really they're not stopping for the tricks. They're stopping for you. And you've got to learn who you are and what you can do for them, and interact with them. And until you've spent the hours out there, you're not going to have a very good idea of what that all is and how you do it. So the main thing is to get street time. Get that time out there and get hours, days, weeks, and then you start to get a sense of the interaction with people, and that is by far more important than any trick you can present them with, because really magic doesn't have the intrinsic, inherent entertainment value that we magicians tend to invest in it. And as far as the business owners, other performers are concerned, always treat everybody be very considerate of everyone on a pitch or surrounding a pitch. Never block a sidewalk. That is one thing that I'm really aware of, is audience control, audience management, to keep thoroughfares clear, keep people out of the street, keep them up on the sidewalk, allow enough space for pedestrians to pass. So treat business owners with a consideration. Keep their doorways clear. If they don't want you performing in front of their business, smile and go someplace else, you know. Okay, I guess that's it for this week, for what it's worth. Next week, I really don't have any plans. Like and subscribe this to this is for what it is, if you will, and see you next week. Hopefully I'll feel better tomorrow and can start to give more thought to next week's efforts. So, okay, keep the comments coming, please, and see you guys then. Ciao, ciao.